Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Welcome to People in Transition. This week, we have a special guest, Zelinka Parsons. Elizabeth is an accomplished lawyer, facilitator, author, speaker, board-certified coach, and the visionary behind multiple thriving consulting firms. After a distinguished tenure at an international law firm, Elizabeth decided to leverage her rich professional background to empower others. Her focus is on steering high-achieving individuals toward crafting purposeful and satisfying lives post-careers. And as we'll talk today, I believe not only for those high-achieving individuals, but for many individuals, her support and guidance can provide a real roadmap. In today's episode, we'll delve into her book, Encore, and explore topics like retirement anxiety, bridging your identity from work to retirement, why retirement can't just be 365 days of vacation, and so much more. I'm excited about our discussion today. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Bob. I so appreciate it. Very honored to be here.
Elizabeth, one of my signature questions that my listeners really enjoy knowing about my guest is, if you think back when you were a child, what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Gosh, it's fun to think back on those times. I fervently wanted to be a veterinarian when I was quite little. Just love of animals, and that seemed to be the simple way to imagine helping them. That morphed into wanting to be a heart surgeon when I was in high school, because that seemed also important and helpful and really hard, which I have a history of liking to do, pursue hard things. But by the time I got to college, I realized I was never going to succeed in chemistry. So I switched to economics and law, eventually made my way to law school.
And Elizabeth, what were the transition moments that you went through to get to where you're at today from that picture of yourself as a child wanting to be a veterinarian?
Sure. When I did go to law school, I managed to get into a great school, Georgetown, which offered a night program. I was working full time and decided to go to law school at night so that I could continue to earn money and minimize my loans and those things. And so by the time I finished a 4-year program and working intensely over those 4 years, I felt like I could do just about anything. I think I'd gotten 3 hours of sleep a night for 4 years. So from there, I joined a big international law firm and just hunkered down and kept on working as hard as humanly possible. And suddenly 10 years had gone by and I was married with 2 small kids. And I sort of faced this existential crisis of realizing I was not going to be able to brute force my way through an A+ at work and motherhood and family life. And I made a really tough decision then in 2003 to leave my career. And that also meant at the time choosing to leave Washington, D.C., because without a career that could support what it takes to live in a city like that, I thought it made sense to really start over in a way. So that was when I moved my family to Tucson, Arizona. It matched my love of the outdoors, and it was a much calmer place and felt like I could raise my family here, much different cost of living and those things. And I really, at the time, had this idea that I was front ending my retirement in my own mind. I thought, I'll just figure it out and take some time and use the time now with my kids. Well, I'll earn money later. I'll figure that part out. And of course, like all these wonderful things we do that we think we have figured out, they present wonderful challenges that we have to solve for ourselves. And so as I sort of meandered through that solution, it led me to become an entrepreneur and to begin working with people in new ways beyond, just lawyer. I was a recruiter at first, and then eventually, when the 2008 collapse happened, I had to pivot that business and began actually working with people in transition, because I knew so many people like me were now going to be forced out of the big law industry, not by their own choosing. And I know how hard it was for me. So I began developing some programs based on my own transition in an effort really to help folks reinvent and figure out how they could deploy themselves in new ways. And so, gosh, that was 15 years ago or so. And I have just deepened, my relationship to that work. And it's just been a wonderful ride.
And Elizabeth, how did you come to be an expert on retiring? I understand you are taking kind of your own personal journey and using that as a basis, but did you do anything else to help really make yourself be that expert on this topic area?
Absolutely, yes. I started working in the space, really, again, focusing more on people transitioning, whether by choice or not, very much, I suppose, like people who are in some stage of career and confronting the need to make a change that is not necessarily obvious, as I had done myself, because I was only 35 when I left my legal career in big law. And I was far from anything we'd call retirement age. So I really didn't think of it that way at that time, but I did become quite conversant just through my own study and some of the psychological challenges of navigating major changes and leaving our comfort zones. And all of that was really in an effort to explain my own challenge to myself and deepen my understanding of, why it was as hard as it was, which was a surprise to me. I thought I'd just land on my feet, But what was interesting is as I was doing this work, a rather large law firm reached out to me and said, would you be willing to work with our population of lawyers who are now beginning to consider retiring? Because from our perspective, many of the themes are the same, and it's a very challenging transition for them as well. And it made immediate sense to me, which then caused me to start looking into this whole notion of retirement, because it occurred to me I had used it in my own narrative. When I changed, my situation, hilariously, I said I was front-ending my retirement, almost as if retirement is this substantive concept that, we all are guaranteed to live. And it's just a rather interesting social construct. And so I really began diving into the history of retirement, how it became such a laden social construct, and why is it that when we arrive at that moment, we have been looking forward to it in theory for decades, but when we get there, often it is a very daunting, lonely place. And I started learning that from my clients, that they were a little embarrassed to say out loud, I'm scared to death. I don't know what this means for me. So it was all a lot of self-study, to be honest, and of course, learning from the people I've worked with. But yeah, that's really how it all started.
In your book, Encore, at the very beginning, you really capture the reader's attention. Part 1, Retirement Anxiety, When Liberation Feels Like Loss. Elizabeth, what did you want the reader to know after reading that title?
Oh, what a great question. I think what I was trying to convey in one phrase was that the rest of the world is watching and thinking, lucky you, you're liberated. You are free. You are going to launch yourself into this wonderful future where you get to do whatever you want, whenever you want. You're finally able to take a deep breath and just enjoy your life. And what I have learned from hundreds and hundreds of people at that moment is that they are feeling an enormous sense of loss and often feel that they have nowhere to express that because everyone else, everyone around them is popping the champagne cork and they feel a little sheepish, admitting that at best, they're unsettled, and at worst, they're actually quite terrified. And I guess I wanted to start my book from a place of helping people see they're not alone. I mean, this is a very, very common experience for people to have, even if it's not commonly expressed.
Later in the book, you talk about how people that you've been coaching feel about the notion of retiring. You say the common themes are stark. We hear things like, absolutely hate the word, let's not use it, or I'm really not sure. I know I feel very unsettled by the idea, or I haven't said this to anybody, but the truth is I'm terrified because I have no idea what's about to happen to my life. Elizabeth, now the focus is on, for those people who are retiring, kind of what is possible, having achieved so much in the past. What's the message that you want that person that you're coaching to take away, that pivot from that feeling of fear to the feeling of possibilities?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that this is a leaving behind of something that has meant a lot, right, to my clients. And it's okay to grieve it. It's normal. You are saying goodbye, old friend. The people I work with have cared deeply about their professional lives, and to let it go is hard. Like letting go anything meaningful is hard. And so, first of all, I think it is helpful for people to simply have a place to acknowledge that and recognize that that's just a normal part of this inflection point moving through it. But the next thing that I truly try to help people connect with is that, there is a new skill that is on the horizon for nearly everyone who's been deeply engaged in a career. And that is to begin to move into this new mindset. So for most of my clients, what I say to them is, you have been an outstanding reactor. You have been able to handle an enormous amount of material and content coming at you every single day. Your job is to show up, see the problem and solve it, or react to the need, or respond to the request. And there is just an endless stream of this content coming at you day after day after day. And so much so that I think the muscle of our imagination or creativity becomes a little dormant, because it's not that we're not creative, but we're entering the question of creativity at a different point. We're not looking at a blank canvas. We are being given things to deal with. And what I help them see is that you're about to move from reactor to creator. And that's exciting. You just need to have some tools. You need to have a new way to think about it and a framework to think about this. And to really begin playing with that question, what do I want? And it's a hard thing to answer just all by yourself from scratch. It's a very big question. And so I think the minute I often say that very thing to people, and I see this light bulb go on, now that's an interesting question. What do I want? And how would I become the creator of my experience? And that's a lot of what our programming material helps people get into.
Elizabeth, you talk about in your book about the comfort zone, and it's the comfort zone's paradox. Can you explain that to us?
Absolutely. Yes, it was quite the discovery for me because, as I say, when I made this change, I found it really destabilizing. And when I discovered this idea of the comfort zone, so much started to make sense to me. So psychologically, the comfort zone is this place where we feel a sense of competence, comfort, and mastery. And, we sort of know what to expect. We know how to handle the things coming our way. We know it's sort of that feeling of right place, right time. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do and how I function here. And I was certainly in my comfort zone, when I was practicing law, when I made the decision to leave that firm, I knew how to do what I was doing and I knew how to do it well. Now, the comfort zone can also be a place for stagnation if we're not careful. If we stay in one place too long as human beings, we get so good at what we're doing that the lack of fresh challenge can actually lead us to stagnate. And there were real studies that show this. I go into this in the book a little bit, but that show how our brains will not grow as energetically when we linger in our comfort zones too long. So there's real power in deciding to leave your comfort zone or expand it. However, there are just as many studies that show if you leap out of it too suddenly, you can trigger those fear pathways in our neurology, the flight, fight, or freeze reactions. And I sort of refer to that as our panic zone, where we just overwhelm our circuits so completely that we don't know quite what to do. And I would say that's sort of what I did when I base jumped out of my life the way I did. Not meaning to, but I really did it so suddenly that it took me quite a long time to figure out what my new comfort zone looked like. So what we try to do with our work is to help people build a gradual pathway from their current comfort zone to a new one. And what we call that is the learning zone. You begin to embrace new challenges gradually in a way that feels manageable, so you can face these challenges with confidence. And slowly but surely you expand your comfort zone, and then you're in your growth zone. You're beginning to happily engage in new ways and become a student of new things. And the next thing you know, you have a new comfort zone that's just much broader and richer than the prior one. So that theory has a lot of power for us in the work we do.
In a number of places throughout the book, you talk about identification that executives have with their working life. One place, and I just love this, you describe one client as saying, I achieve, therefore I am. So exactly who will I be as a retired guy? Can you shed some light on that? What's it saying to us and the impact it has on people that are retiring?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, there were so many interesting aspects of identity, and I certainly became quite curious about it myself because I realized only after I left how identified I was with what I was doing for a living. And it turns out that, we human beings love to categorize ourselves. And, there are lots of theories in psychology that speak to this. But in essence, we have aspects of our identity that are heavily tied to the roles we play in life. It is the most accessible way we understand ourselves through our roles. And so you can certainly see this, even if you imagine how you might introduce yourself in at a cocktail party, you're going to begin describing yourself in all likelihood via the roles you play. You'll describe your professional roles. You'll say things like, I'm a dad with, so many kids. I live in this state, or but these are all categories we belong to. It gives us a sense of communion and connection, and we see where we fit. And so it's quite understandable that that's what we do. And our professional lives, where we spend, honestly, when the height of our careers, most of our waking hours, there's sort of no wonder that category becomes extremely important to our sense of identity. We perhaps not only categorize ourselves by the overarching label we apply to our career, so for example, doctor or lawyer, but we may even create subcategories within that role that describe critical functions we play, like I'm a negotiator, or I'm a problem solver, I'm a mentor. So the other thing about those roles is they often provide enormous sources of positive self-regard. We've become good at them. We know how to do them well. They feed us and they send us signals all day long that we're good at what we do. And if they all disappear suddenly, it can literally feel like we have lost our identities, particularly the parts of our identities that give us that high self-esteem and self-regard. So it's important to be aware of it. It's quite solvable, but if you're not aware that that's part of what leaving a career can mean, it can be a blind spot that takes you down some lonely, dark roads if you're not careful.
Elizabeth, you said that you uncovered 3 important motivational properties of the self. You describe them as communion, agency, and coherence. Can you shed some light on those 3 and the impact that has on my retirement planning?
Absolutely. Yes, there's some wonderful research that has helped clarify what they call motivational properties of the self. And we are motivated to create these aspects in our lives, and they together help us achieve a sense of well-being. The word communion speaks to our natural desire as human beings to find connection with others and to belong to groups. It is just part of how we're wired. Working life almost always provides a strong sense of communion. Perhaps we belong to a profession, or we belong to a company, or we belong to a particular area of expertise inside of our corporate world or executive function. And that's important. It's in a sense our tribe. Agency is that sense that we have enough mastery to make things happen, that we know what to do to achieve the goals or outcomes that are important to us. It's a sense of competence, basically. And then coherence speaks to our general need for habits, structure, and routines. We need to live patterns. That's, again, what human beings thrive in. And that doesn't mean we don't appreciate variety and we don't appreciate change, but the structure is quite important for most of us in terms of our psychological well-being. And when you consider what work provides, it is the architecture of life when we're working during our careers. We wake up in the morning, we probably make most of our choices around when we need to show up to work. We know what our work days generally look like and what's expected of us. We know the people we're going to be dealing with. We know the tasks we have to solve. We get through that day, and what remains at the end of the day is determined in many ways by when we get to finish our work. So, work provides all of those things. And assuming you're happy in your working life, it can feel quite satisfying and reassuring. So to lose them all at once, again, without a game plan for replacing them, can leave a person feeling very aimless.
To kind of build on that notion, a little bit later on in the book, you talk about retirement offers a chance to drop the mindset of success and competition. In the future, yours is the only opinion that really matters. When your own sense of usefulness and contribution becomes the focus of your progress, you can enjoy the peace and serenity that comes with setting the metrics and keeping your own score. Elizabeth, is that really possible for someone that is going into retirement?
I think it is, because I've seen it. I'd have to say I have seen so many people evolve to a place where what they're emphasizing in their lives has utterly changed. They are no longer measuring themselves around these externalities like, how big was my bonus this year, or how many hours did I work or bill, how many accolades did I receive. But because they have thought deeply about what meaning and purpose are going to be about for them in this new chapter, they're able to really begin to assess the quality of their days by whether or not they're experiencing those kinds of things. Are they engaging in relationships that matter to them? Are they taking care of their health? Are they having experiences that they're treasuring and creating memories that they care about? Are they contributing in some way that feels useful and meaningful to them? And it is a very different way to begin assessing whether you're living good days or bad days, whether you can look back on this last year and say, gosh, was that spectacular or was it not? And I think those are not questions we ask from an internal place, usually when we're working, because work gives us so many success measures. That's sort of what we're trained, even from little kids and getting grades in school. It's what other people are telling us about our performance that matters most.
You talk in the book, and this so speaks to me, wide open, undefined nothingness makes it difficult for most people to make choices. It's too overwhelming. And then you give some tools like flex time and some other categories to help deal with that schedule. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. I think you're quite right. This idea of open time with no sense of how to fill it is a common concern that clients express to me. And one of the things that we invite them to do is really to walk us through a perfect day. And I ask them to suspend all of the thinking around what they should do and have to do, and literally think about, what would an ideal day be? And, when would you find time to be physically active? When would you most enjoy being social? When do you like to be out and about? When do you like to be alone and focused and using your mind? And we begin constructing just an example of a day. This is not a day you have to live over and over again, but we begin to build some architecture around a day that might be energizing and fun and intriguing and also productive. But again, it's flexing that creativity muscle. And I really encourage in the beginning, especially all of my clients, to be proactive in planning out their days and weeks, because waking up to an open-ended, aimless day feels very unsettling to most of them. So building in that structure is really helpful. And the other piece that we often suggest is actually get an annual planning calendar and even think about your year proactively. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to see? What's going to happen during this year if it's a fabulous year? And so that proactive planning really helps people begin working that creativity muscle, but also really generating and building in content to their life that they're excited about.
And that ties into the part in the book where you talk about a model for their life resembling a monolith, that you suggest that they think of it in terms of a mosaic and making combinations of diverse elements. Speak to that just a little bit.
Absolutely. Yes, that is a model that resonates almost completely with the people we see. And what we say is, look, you've had this one huge thing called a career driving a lot of the way you live and the choices you can make and the freedom you have. So now what you're going to do is think more in terms of building in a collection of ways to be engaged in life that are all energizing and enjoyable and useful, but they fit together nicely. They make a beautiful picture together, and nothing is so overwhelming that it blots out everything else. And so we help them begin to map out goals for example, what are some of your goals for your health and your social world? How would you like to enhance opportunities to explore your inner life or develop ways to deepen your peace of mind? What are some dormant parts of yourself you'd like to reactivate? And we actually build an action plan to look at how do you get into action on these things so that you can light up lots of parts of your life all at the same time and have a rich, energizing, mosaic, really. And that concept is very, very helpful to people.
At the end of the book, you talk about in your journal, you have a Latin quote, and its translation is, "It's later than you think." Why is that saying important to the retirement person?
I really thought about that for myself as much as anybody. And anytime I feel afraid to try something that's a little daunting, I remind myself, I look at that quote, which is on my own desk, and remind myself, that I don't have a minute to lose. Who knows how many years I have? None of us really do. And if you want to do it, just do it. What is there to lose, really? Most of my clients have checked the success box and they've achieved things in their careers. They've got the money they need. They've achieved all kinds of things in the eyes of the world. Now, if there's something left that you want to do, if not now, when? And it might be later than you think. You just don't know. And so I just remind my clients who often are risk averse and they don't like the idea of quote unquote failing, that there is no way to really get this wrong. You just take it one step at a time. And it's like that wonderful saying of driving at night. You just need to see 6 feet in front of you and you can make the whole trip that way. So just take that next step. Don't waste time doubting yourself. You will live your way to the answer.
Elizabeth, are there any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who is either going to be in retirement or maybe is in retirement right now to help them on their journey?
Oh, absolutely. Gosh. In fact, in the report we prepare for clients, I probably have 40 books listed as great resources. But here are some for different reasons that I will recommend to clients very, very frequently. One, which is a relatively recent book by Oliver Burkeman, is called 4,000 Weeks. And it is just a lovely read. It makes me laugh out loud, and it reminds us and me that we only have so much time on this earth. And so we can drop the intensity of worrying about, getting every last trivial thing done and just enjoy our lives. I also love The Power of Full Engagement, which is a book about one way you can think about structuring your life that is quite refreshing. It's about really how to think about managing your energy more than worrying about managing your time. That's by Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz. Another book, Deep Work by Cal Newport, is another fabulous book about a fresh way to think about life structure. And then finally, Atomic Habits by James Clear is quite helpful for people who really are interested in embracing new habits that are important to them. It's just a wonderful book on the science of habits and how to get them to work in your life for you and create really wonderful changes that aren't always easy to implement. So those are 4 that come to mind that I routinely recommend to clients and I get wonderful feedback about.
Elizabeth, as I expected, we have gone through so much great information today. If you were to leave our listeners with 3 things that you think they should remember as they are looking at their own retirement, what are those 3 things you want them to remember?
The first thing I think is that you're not alone if you're standing at the edge of this moment and it feels overwhelming and daunting. Do not think you're alone. It is an unbelievably enormous change and nobody just glides through it. So if you need help, go get it, whether it's a book or it's a coach or it's just a friend. The second thing I'd say is that you really probably are standing at the moment of greatest opportunity maybe that you've ever had in your life. You've got perhaps, the financial security you need. You've got the wisdom of experience. You've got relationships. You understand the world and who you are in it. And so you've really got this amazing opportunity to define a chapter for yourself that's really just spectacular. So why not go for it? And mostly just enjoy the ride. I think at the end of the day, what I've learned from my clients is it's really about the people in our lives, the way they touch us, the way we touch them, and deepening relationships is probably the richest vein that I see everybody mine when they finally free up from the press of work. They discover friends and depths to family relationships that they've just not yet had time for, and they really, really take so much away from that. So I think those are the big themes.
Elizabeth, the book and speaking to you, I can absolutely tell my listeners that it will speak to you as well. I want to thank you for caring about people that are at this stage in their life and providing a roadmap for happiness and a newfound success paradigm. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I so appreciate your interest in having me on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.